you're watching Gearz, brought to you by O'Reilly Auto Parts. Better parts, better prices every day.
Hey, welcome to Gearz. You know, last week we dug into some of the final assembly of the Sergeant Rock project and showed you how the frame, the axles, the steering, the suspension, the brakes were all designed to work together. And it was a lot of work crammed into just a few short minutes. After that, we moved on to the interior and showed some of the techniques involved in designing and constructing custom seat brackets, floor panels, and even a custom console that will not only look good, but will also be functional for the vehicle that you're working on. And that is where we're going to pick it up again today. Because even though the interior looks really good, it's not completely finished yet. Because we still need to do something with the door panels, which are over there connected to the doors, and the kick panels, which at this point don't exist. Now, as you can see, the original doors have a stamped panel on the inside, but that's it. There's nothing else. So we decided to punch things up a little bit by building some inserts to go into those indentations. So the first thing we have to decide is what we want to build those out of, because we got a couple things going on here. We've got brown distressed leather on the seats, but we also have a lot of brushed aluminum going on too. Both would look good, both would fit. But in keeping with the World War II bomber vibe we got going on here, I think the brushed aluminum and rivets is going to look better on the doors. So that's what we're going to do. The first step is to create a pattern for the insert, and masking tape works great for this. Now just transfer the pattern to cardboard and cut it out to make your template. Make sure that you spend a few minutes truing up and trimming your template so it fits exactly how you want it. Because trimming cardboard is a whole lot easier than trimming metal later on. Once your template's right, transfer the shape to the metal. In this case, we're using 14 gauge aluminum because it fits the depth of the pocket really well, and it also matches the look of the console. Now, to mount our panels, we're going to use the same brass screws that we did on the console. So that means not only drilling evenly spaced holes in the panel, but also in the door. And of course, those need to be tapped. Then, of course, the final step is to true up the ends and the openings and brush and seal the aluminum so it matches the console. Now, if you were going to upholster these panels, the process would be similar, but obviously you wouldn't want to build them out of aluminum. That's too expensive. You'd want to use particle board or plastic like a traditional door panel. Also, if you wanted to use hidden fasteners instead of screws, you'd have to get the clips that you need. Then you'd have to slot your panel, hide these under the upholstery, and then drill your door accordingly. All right, let's see how these fit. Now, once it's all put back together, you can see what a difference all this makes to the look of the door. And it's not that hard, it just takes a little bit of time. Now, take a look at this. The button head screws, the brushed finish, give the door a nice dimension without making it too busy or too gaudy. Just nice and clean and to the point. Now these are the original door handles. All we did is scuff them up so they matched everything and put them in place. And now, this door is ready to go on the truck. Okay, with the doors taken care of, now we are going to turn our attention to these kick panels. And they're a little more difficult than the doors because there is no predetermined shape here. Remember, we've done custom metalwork on the firewall, on the floors, on the cowl, everywhere. So there's no factory piece that's just going to bolt in here. But that's not a problem because all we have to do is build a panel that's going to span this area between the door jamb and the firewall. So I'm going to start by grabbing some trusty cardboard. Then we're going to start building a template so we can make a panel that'll do just that. Since this is a creative process, there's going to be a little bit of trial and error involved until you find what's going to work best for your application. Once you have the shape dialed in, just transfer it to the aluminum and make your panels.
Now, quick tip. Brought to you by E3 Spark Plugs. Born to burn.
A lot of times when you're building a custom panel like this, you're going to want to roll a bead or cut an opening in the panel for detail. Now the problem that you're going to run into is radiusing all the corners of these cuts exactly the same way. Because if you don't, it's going to look bad, and there is no way you can freehand every one of those exactly the same. Now, a lot of people have heard about the tip of taking a paint cap or a washer or a roll of tape to give you your radius. And those work okay until you forget what you used or the roll of tape gets smaller. Now, there's a better way to do it. All you have to do is reach for your set of deep well sockets, and now you can dial in exactly the radius that you want to put into the panel. Then, once you've decided, you can write down the size of the socket on the back of the panel along with your other measurements, so if you ever need to make another panel, even if it's years from now, you know exactly what size radius you put in it. Which goes to show you, there's more use for these than just tightening nuts and bolts. If you'd like to learn more tips to make your life easier in the shop, check out the tips page on the website. Welcome back to Gearz, where we have just finished laying out the interior of Sergeant Rock by building custom door panels and kick panels to match the floors and the console that we did last week. And as you can see, it looks awesome. Now we're going to turn our attention to the fuel tank and the batteries. Now, because the 1941 Dodge half-ton is actually a pretty small truck, and we've already got a ton of things mounted under the cab, like a transfer case and a rear steering unit and extra cross members, about the only place that we can mount the tank and batteries is right here at the front of the bed. But we don't just want any old fuel tank. No, we got to have something that actually matches the look of what we're doing here. So we went to Rick's Tanks and had them whip one up for us. Take a look. Rick's Hot Rod Shop specializes in stainless steel fuel tanks for classic cars and muscle cars, or they will hand build you something if you're working on something crazy like we are. So we gave them some measurements and a basic design of what we wanted. This is what they built. Now, in typical Rick's fashion, you can see it's made out of stainless steel. All the seams are TIG welded, and they even rolled a bead in the sides to make it look like an old jerry can, which is really cool. Now, up here on top, you've got the place for your sending unit. Over here, you have a place for a vent. Of course, your inlet is here on the side, and then in the center, if you'll take a look, you'll notice that all Rick's tanks are fully baffled, so you're not going to have a problem with fuel slosh if you're doing any kind of high-performance driving. Now, for a fuel pump, we had them do two of them. We got two electric pumps. Both have the capacity to handle 850 horsepower. And the reason we're doing two is so we have an auxiliary pump just in case our primary pump takes a dump. Now, if you'll notice, this center part is completely clockable. That will allow you to mount your fuel inlets and outlets wherever you need to for your application, making this a very, very easy tank to install. To mount the tank, first we're going to add a layer of rubberized padding to the back and the bottom and on the mounting straps so we don't have any metal-to-metal contact. Next, we'll install the sending unit, the rollover vent, and get our fuel outlet situated. Finally, we'll just set the tank in place and mount it with the straps.
You had the hard job on that one.
To get our fuel to the engine, we're going to plumb our lines with Earl's SpeedFlex hose and Anatough fittings, because the SpeedFlex has a super tough braided stainless steel outer shell, and inside it's got a Teflon liner, which makes it compatible with all the fuels out there, including those with ethanol. All right, while we're back here, we need to lay out our batteries. And I say batteries because we're going to use dual batteries on this thing because that rear steer sucks so much juice. So we're going to start with a pair of Optima yellow top deep cycle batteries because first of all, they have 870 cranking amps. Second of all, they're a deep cycle battery, which means they recover really quickly, which is always great on an off-road rig. Okay, we have our dual batteries. Now how are we going to mount them? Well, you need a battery box. So we went to O'Brien's Truckers and picked up these finned aluminum battery boxes, which are made specifically for these Optima batteries. Now, as you can see, when you put the lid on, you have access to the side posts through these holes. Then you've got these special fittings that just screw in and give you access to the battery. The benefit of this is it keeps the top, the sides, and the back of the battery box all nice and clean with no wiring. It all just comes out one side. Okay, you got your batteries, you got your battery boxes. Now, how are you going to make them all work together? Well, you can freehand wire this, but a much better way to go is one of these dual battery kits from Painless Performance. Now, this kit will allow you to run on a single battery when you're just tooling around normally, but then when you need that extra power to start something or to run a big accessory, you flip the switch and you bring the fire of both batteries into play. If you're going to be running dual batteries, you got to have one of these kits to control them. Okay, we got our batteries, we got our boxes, we've got our way to control those batteries. Now we just need to decide where we're going to mount those in the bed of that truck, because there's not a lot of room left back there. And the best place for dual batteries on this truck is on either side of the fuel tank, with our wiring hidden in front and running down through the floor. Hey, we're back and rolling quickly toward the completion of the Sergeant Rock project. Now, so far today, we've shown you how to build custom aluminum door panels and kick panels, and then we put in a custom stainless steel gas tank and a couple of batteries. Now we're going to turn our attention to the front of the truck and lay out the cooling system. Now, putting a radiator or a cooling system in a project like that is a lot different than your typical hot rod or restoration project, because with these, you can usually go through a catalog or on a website and order a brand new aluminum radiator that's just going to bolt right in place. However, on a project like Sergeant Rock, where virtually everything is handmade, well, you know the radiator is going to be the same deal. And since there's a lot of people that are getting into these kind of projects, it's important that we show you how to solve some of the issues that might come up. All right, since we have very limited space in our grill shell, it's important not only that we have a radiator that fits the shell, but also has the capacity to cool 605 cubic inches of hot Mopar. And of course, having an original radiator to start with is always a good thing. But if you don't have one, you just got to start from scratch and make some measurements. But even if you do have an original radiator, you're going to have to make some changes, like where your inlets and outlets are going to be, where your drain plug is going to be, where your filler neck is going to be. Are you going to use air conditioning? Are you going to use oil coolers? Are they going to mount in front or back? What kind of fan you're going to use? All this needs to be decided ahead of time. Now, once we did that, we sent the original radiator and our changes to C&R Racing and had them build us a custom aluminum radiator. Check it out. As you can see, the dimensions on the C&R radiator are pretty similar to the original, but the core is much thicker to give us the cooling capacity that we need. We also had C&R weld some mounting tabs in the original location to help us mount the radiator. And most importantly, the inlets and outlets have been changed so they're compatible with our big block Mopar. All right, the cooling fan is next, and for that we went to WWII and got one of their 2-speed electric fans with the aluminum shroud. Now, WWII uses some heavy-duty motors on their fans, so this is perfect as a primary cooling fan. And the unique shape of the blades fan to pull 2,400 CFM of air through that radiator, which is going to be great. Now, one of the main causes of overheating is not running a shroud with a fan. That's why these WWII units come with the aluminum shroud. It forces the fan to pull more air through more of the radiator core and give you better cooling. Now, to control this fan, we're going to use this electric fan controller, which adjusts the speed of the fan depending on the temperature we've set, so the thing is not just running wide open all the time. The brackets that come with the kit make it very simple to mount the fan to the radiator. All right, now we are ready to fit the radiator to the truck. And fortunately, the grills on these old power wagons come off as one big piece. giving us great access to the front of the truck. Once the radiator's mocked in place, we'll finish up our mounting brackets as well as decide what we're going to do with the hose inlets and outlets and the filler neck and the overflow canister. Be prepared to spend some time here working through all of this until you get it set up exactly the way you want it.
Tool Tech, brought to you by Cornwell Tools, the choice of professionals since 1919.
When it comes to working on metal, or working on a car for that matter, one ability that you need to have is the ability to put a hole in a piece of metal. Now, when people think about holes in metal, the first tool they reach for, of course, is a drill. And that's a great tool for punching small holes in panels. But if you need to do bigger holes like this, well, you're going to be pretty hard-pressed to find a drill that's going to pop that big a hole. So when it comes to big holes, the first tool people think of course, is a hole saw. Now, this is a great tool. These are designed to cut holes in wood and plastic and metal and fiberglass and pretty much everything, which means it's not the best tool for cutting holes in metal. Generally, the hole is pretty ragged, and the teeth usually melt down after just a few holes. A better tool, if you're going to continue to use a drill, is what we call a Fabricators hole cutter. Now, as you can see, this is designed completely different than a typical hole saw. These are actually a metal cutting tool, and they are designed with special alloys, special blades that will allow you to make hundreds of cuts in aluminum, stainless steel, or steel that are extremely accurate. Another option for making holes in metal is to punch them, and an iron worker is an awesome tool for punching perfect holes in heavier steel or aluminum. However, if you don't have the room or the budget for an iron worker, there are manual punches available to help you punch holes, at least in sheet metal. All you have to do is just select the size of hole you want, install the punch, and ratchet it down. The result is a perfect hole with no burrs and no distortion. So, as you can see, there is a lot of different ways to put holes in metal. And the more you know that's out there, the more you're going to be able to reach for the right tool when you need it.
And now, Paint Tech, brought to you by Wizards Products. Make it shine.
When it comes to paint, most people want it to look good. That's why they'll spend hours polishing and buffing to try to get that ultimate shine. But to get that ultimate finish, that usually involves some wet sanding and buffing with a buffer. And this is where you can get into trouble if you're not careful, because a lot of people don't realize that even though the paint looks the same on the surface, beneath the surface, it's not the same. Since paint is in a liquid form when it's sprayed on, it'll naturally flow with gravity, meaning that the areas with a high crown curve or a crease will naturally have less paint on them than a low valley will. Now, this really isn't an issue until you start wet sanding and buffing your paint, because you'll burn through a body line like this in a second if you're not careful. So a good trick is to take some masking tape and tape in about a ½ inch from the body line. Then make sure to put some tape on the body line itself. Now what this does is gives you a nice boundary to stop with the sandpaper or the buffer, so you don't accidentally get into an area that might have thin paint with sandpaper or a power tool. Then once you're done, you pull the tape off, and then you buff the body line by hand. This way you don't remove too much paint, everything will look good, and you've got a nice looking paint job.
And now, what are you working on? Brought to you by Carrera, Motorsports at Home.
Today's What Are You Working On comes from Ashley from Colorado, and she is a 4x4 nut. She says for about the last 10 years, her husband's been teaching her all the ins and outs of building a hardcore off-road rig. So she decided she was ready for her own project. So she picked up this, a 1979 Toyota that was on its way to the junkyard. She got it for $400. That's awesome. And she decided she was going to build a hardcore rig out of it. Now take a look at this. They built a 3-link suspension for the front and a 4-link suspension for the rear, slapped on King coilover shocks, and 37-inch tall tires to go with the lockers and the 529 gears and the Toyota axles. You got some good numbers happening here. Then a Chevy 4.3 V6 replaced the dead Toyota engine, and the interior was gutted and filled with Mastercraft suspension seats and a custom dash and gauges. Now, since the wheelbase had been stretched on this thing, the bed needed to be stretched too. So look at this. They cut the bed and sectioned it and lengthened it so the wheels fit into the wheel wells properly. Now, you might be thinking, why go through the trouble of that? Well, take a look at this. Because Ashley wanted the tires to tuck into the wheel wells when she had this thing at full articulation. And as you guessed, she wheels this thing hard. Ashley, what a cool project. And I really like the fact that you did most of the work yourself. So, to recognize that, we hooked up with our buddies at Carrera, and they're going to set you up with one of their Fast Classics digital race car sets. So the times that your husband and you can't go out and wheel, you can race each other. Also, we're going to hook you up with one of our Sergeant Rock packages, one of the die casts, one of the shirts, one of the brass guitar picks, and we're going to set you up with an O'Reilly's gift card to help you out when you need some parts. And finally, we are going to set you up with one of our project planning books so you can document everything that you did to that project. Now, the rest of you guys, if you want to get your project featured on the show, you got to go to the website, go to Gearz Nation, and submit the project. Also, make sure you check us out on social media because we always have cool stuff going on there too. All right, that takes care of it today. We will see you next time.